All right. This is Dawn Nocera, and I am here with Pamelah Landers. And I have invited Pamelah to talk to me and talk with us and have a conversation about her understanding about what her activation code is in general, uh, her understanding of my work with the activation code. So you're going to be, as an audience member, part of that conversation. So welcome, Pamelah.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm super happy for you to be here because I think out of everybody that I know, no, I don't even think this, I know that you have a better understanding of my work than even I do sometimes. So this is great. And we're kind of like besties. So we talk all the time.
Right.
We have the conversations are oftentimes about our work, about my work and about your work. So with that, I would love to hear kind of what is your understanding about my work with the activation codes and then in activation codes in general.
So my understanding, and this has been a journey that we've been on for about 4 years at this point, my experience about what it is that activation codes are is a soul agreement. I feel like people are born with activation codes just like they're born with their fingerprints, or just like they're born with the 8 cells at the base of the spine that never change, or your eye color that never changes. Like it's a soul agreement that you were born with. And an activation code is something you are. You just are it. And it's with you wherever you go. So you have it's an energetic, this is my experience too, right?
Yeah.
It's an energetic this is the kind of feeling. It's sort of like your auric field that's always with you. This activation code is in that field. So wherever you go, it's vibrating. People either respond to it in a, oh, yes, I want more of that, or, oh, go away, I don't want that, or, I'm really repelled, I can't stand it, right? So, and it's not personal. That's the thing I love about it. People's responses to it are not about who you are personally, but this is just what you're activating, what you're carrying with you, just who you are. Does that answer that question?
and I love that you brought the fact that it's not personal. Like, this is our energy. This is what we carry with us throughout life. And I wonder, just even at the very beginning, if you could talk to us a little bit about your experience with just the understanding that people are going to be either ready for your energy or they're not going to be ready for your energy. How's that changed your life or your perspective, or has it? Maybe it hasn't.
It has. It actually has changed, because I've realized that because it's not personal, that there are some people who are just going to not want to be in my field. They're just not going to want to be around me because of what I activate, which I'm sure we'll be getting into.
Yeah.
And there are other people who are just like asking for it. They're like, oh my God, I so want what you activate. I so need what you activate. And I'm so excited to be hanging out with you, but they're not consciously saying that because they don't even know, right? So the people who feel like in the most extreme repelled by it, either they're not ready for it, or it is so in their face and they're not wanting to deal with it and they want to be in denial about it, right? That's one of the responses that happen for people. And again, unconsciously, they just they move away. They don't try to connect. Like, I'm in a Toastmasters group that meets in person, and there are people who come in as a guest, and if they're not responding to my activation, because I'm a really strong leader in that group, if they're not in a positive response to that, they can't come back, right? And everybody has an activation, so everybody in the group is activating something, but the leaders have a tendency to have more energy going out, right, about what their activation is. So
a more dominant.
Some people are repelled, more dominating, yeah. And so people are at one extreme repelled. Other people are just saying, I've already done that. I don't need that kind of support, or it's not the right time, or I've got other things going on that are needing more. Like, this is all unconscious. They're not even consciously saying it. And then there are other people going, oh my God, where have you been all my life? Right?
And, yeah. And I wonder if you've understood or met anyone who, you know, that they're like ready, they need it, but they're so afraid of it. Like, they can feel that tension between, I love your energy, I want it, and yet like they still hold back because it frightens them into what changes that they're going to have to make if they actually engage with that consciously.
I'm aware that happens. Yes, I'm aware that happens on a somewhat regular basis, actually.
Yeah.
when I'm in groups.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's talk about your activation code specifically. And you have more than one. So I would like to hear your understanding of what, we'll say, your, all of them or one of them, you can pick whichever one you want, your activation code, and in your language. What language would you use to talk about your activation code?
Okay. So the first time, I'm just going to go back to the first time that the word activation code came up in a relationship with Dawn, is I had emailed her a recording of me singing. And her email back was, your voice activates healing abuse. I'm going, what? What are you talking about? So my first exposure to activation codes was telling her that I'm assuming she's talking about my singing voice, right? Because that was what she responded to. Oh, right. And it turns out that it was not only my singing voice, but I found out then it was anytime I was communicating in some verbal style. Then I found out it was my art. And I'm going, oh, it's a nonverbal and verbal activation, right? So we were in the process of Dawn learning about what activation codes do and what they are, how to talk about them and communicate about them. So now what I know after 4 years of what my and in fact, it was almost literally 4 years ago that this happened.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
It was in July of 2014 that happened.
Wow.
I know. The healing abuse activation code for a while was the only one that I knew about. Then she added bonding, and then she added the sweet spot. Then I was like, what does that mean? What is that? So I've been in the process of understanding these and an unfolding process, which I think is really important. Really important. It's like, I read hands. I'm a hand analyst. I read people's life purpose, and they're based on their fingerprints. And it's the same process. You have the soul agreement about your fingerprints. It takes time and experience and watching your life unfold and interact with other people to really understand how the activation works or how your life purpose or life lesson works. It's the same process. So it's taken time to get this. But the healing abuse, what I've learned about that one, and we've changed the language a little bit for some of this, the healing abuse also we're calling now conscious expanding relationships. That's what happens when you heal abuse, and it's self-abuse is a major part of it, but it's also how you relate to people abusing you from other dynamics. So you can imagine if someone is in an abusive relationship or someone is treating them abusively, they're probably not wanting to be around my activation unless they're asking to have a change in that relationship. It's going to be really hard because my energy is constantly going to be healing this dynamic of relationship.
Yeah. And
so I know it's going to be hard for some people.
I agree. And I think that that's one of the reasons why you and I were kind of scripted and contracted, with a soul agreement to be together, because you do activate healing self-abuse. And I had, as a child, a very long history of being self-abusive, both emotionally, physically, I just really bad with myself. And you came along and you just have no room for that. Two things, because you've done your own work, which means you've done your own work in healing yourself. And and healing from, abuse of others and abuse of any, self-abuse, it just doesn't come into your field anymore. For me, that was so refreshing, just to be in your energy and for you to be on the liberated path of what you activate, because there is a conditioned path, like, right? There's this whole idea of how do we respond to that based on how we think we should respond to that, which means, like some people, like, let's go fight the abusers and let's go tear them down, or like, oh, let me just forgive them, and like, all is well. But there's like a truly liberated path is where you get to integrate it all, and you had done a lot of that work. So I think that was very helpful for me, and I'm just saying it out loud for the 15th millionth time.
And thank you.
That's why we were totally meant to be buddies.
Right. And I also, to add to that is, it's not that I never am self-abusive, but the percentage is down to like less than 10% compared to how I was treating myself last decade, before I did a lot of really, really deep, profound work that moved me through a lot of that. But I was born with this, right? So I had to learn, I had to understand the conditioned path. Some of the language I was using was being mean to myself.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways that before I had the language of this activation, as I would just like, I'm just being so mean to myself. I don't want to be mean to myself. What can I do differently? So that was how I started consciously changing it. And then this, like, self-abuse. Well, that makes total sense.
Yeah. And I just love it. So what about some of your other activations? Maybe the sweet spot one, because that's kind of the newer one. Like, when you first hear about something, it's like, like you said, what is this? I don't know. But it takes like consciousness, like, and it doesn't mean like go figuring it out, but what's been your experience of learning that this is a part of something that you activate? This is a part of your energetic code. So can you explain that around the sweet spot?
I would, one of the languages I've been using for a long time that seems totally related to the sweet spot, but I was using for myself, was about self-love. That feels like a sweet spot. When I'm in a place where I am self-accepting, self-appreciating, self-loving, being kind to myself, being tender with myself, I'm in a sweet spot. That's one of the ways that the sweet spot shows up. So a lot of my work with other people is learning how, based on their hand design, to accept themselves so they can be self-loving. Like, that's my passion for them. I want you to understand who you are based on your design, so you don't have to be mean to yourself anymore. You don't have to be self-abusive. And you can be in the self-loving sweet spot. That's one of the ways that I totally relate to the sweet spot, is through self-love. But how you described it the first time I heard you talk about it was bringing the masculine and feminine together and meeting, kind of like bringing them and having them blend and unite in a way. Not that they are different energies, and so you can't like smash them, right? But bringing them so that they're in alignment with each other and not in a fight with each other.
Right.
So there's been a lot of that has happened for me as a consciousness of the sweet spot. It's looking at, and I'd already been interested in masculine and feminine, but looking at how can I have them working as a cohesive thing, as opposed to not working together and being abusive with each other, really, internally. My own internal masculine and feminine, and then helping other people understand that through whatever language and education I'm doing around that, because I've learned a lot about the difference between men and women over the last couple decades. So I use that as part of the sweet spot conversation. Then there's the other aspect of as above, so below, which is, for me, trusting my intuition.
Yeah.
Trusting my guidance is a sweet spot. And it's another thing that I help people with, is having permission to trust their intuition. That has been huge in the sweet spot conversation.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite pieces of understanding your activation and that energy that is just, it's like the doors are open so that energy can come in. So, that's how I explain the activation codes. It's like the doors are open, whether or not we want to walk through those doors, we kind of like feel the breeze of it. We feel the energy, we feel that there's something in the air, and do I want to be a part of that? Do I want to be a part of the consciousness that the sweet spot is in, being both in my higher self and being in my, human body at the same time, and making that be okay, being both in my masculine and being in my feminine, and letting those two play together as opposed to fight. So
yes. We've had a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah.
And also about ease.
Yes.
That's been a big conversation. And I think that's very much a sweet spot experience of how can it be, what's easy? How can it be easy? Why are you making this so hard? Mean to yourself, self-abusive, versus sweet spot ease.
Yes. And I think that's, for me, the breeze, or that understanding of what the sweet spot is. It's like, it really is this, is it really that easy? Like, is life really that easy? And most people are in this state of like, they still want to work hard. They still want to justify how much they're working and how hard life is on them. So if that's their story, coming into your environment and coming into your space is not going to feel like it might not be the right time for them. Eventually they might get tired of working hard and want something new. And then they would be like, oh, yes, Pamelah is that breath of fresh air. But if they're into that, I have to work hard, or trying to what's coming up right now specifically is trying to justify how much they're working. It's not going to be a really good environment. They're just not going to respond to you in the same way.
Right.
But yeah. So ease, like feeling that ease and feeling that, it's almost like a whole drop in stories. It's like the sweet spot is the storyless space. To me, that's another way.
That's good. I haven't, that.
Another piece of language for it. The storyless place.
The ever expanding language of activations. Yes.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about my work and this work, is that the language expands as we communicate about it together over time. It grows, and then your understanding of it grows, and you get to feel it more in your body, which I hadn't planned to ask about this, but like, what does it feel like to take more ownership of your activation codes and have them, take ownership of them and have that experience of having them in your body?
Actually, I feel more comfortable in my body. I'm less in my head trying to figure stuff out.
Oh, nice.
It's one of your languages has been not figuring things out. Let's not work on figuring things out. So when we get into figuring things out, we're not in the sweet spot.
Right.
We're in a very difficult place. So I feel like that has helped me ground. And I just feel more grounded all the time. I feel safer. I feel a lot safer. And a lot has happened as a result of having this conversation and understanding it. My life events just happened in order for me, because nothing just happened, happened in a way where physical safety became a consciousness that had to be addressed. Yeah. And I ended up spending 6 months, as you know, this would be 2016. So I'd already known about the sweet spot activation by then.
Right.
6 months without a home, traveling throughout California in my car, whatever I could fit in my car, and going to a variety of places, sometimes for a day, sometimes for one place for a month. I was homeless, basically, and my guidance orchestrated this very well. And I was always safe, but I had to learn how to feel physically safe at a whole new level, because I was in a lot of unfamiliar territory. I got lost a lot, which is totally out of character for me. That just hardly ever happens, but I did. I got lost a lot. thank God I had GPS stuff on my phone to get me back on track. But yeah, I had to learn about physical safety. So since that time, I have felt so much more safe. And I'm sure that that was all orchestrated for me to understand the ease.
Yeah.
How much easier my life is being in my body, not my head.
Oh, I'm just remembering like you being in your place in California, which I have been to several times, and you feeling that, I remember you feeling not safe. And
In
then
LA, when
in
I was in
LA,
LA. Yeah.
right? And now you're in Palm Springs in the desert and you have a whole different energy. Like I can feel that you feel safe.
I
And
do.
it's such a relief. I mean, it makes it's an additional level of, it makes it so easy to be in your space because you are more in your sweet spot. You're more trusting. And for you,
Right.
I think maybe for everybody too, like to be able to trust is such a sweet spot experience, but you have life experience that you can help us all, move into that
Yes.
trust a lot more. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yay.
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 I know whenever I hear weird noises, my guides told me last year that one day they told me, you're always safe. So whenever I hear like weird noises and I don't know what they are, my first comment to myself is, you're safe.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
so it's like, okay, I can just breathe now and then figure out what that noise is. What is that noise?
So, another question I'd like to ask is, you just talked a lot about like what's been different for you since knowing your activation codes, like before you knew your activation codes and now. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share about like the difference in your life between before we had this conversation? And you've been really a part of the whole unfolding of this because you've been the receiver of this wisdom as it's like in real time, like as it's coming through. So we're like, this wisdom is, and you've been such a great support in helping me understand the gift that it was. And I want to say thank you so much because I was kind of almost taking it for granted at sometimes, like, oh yeah, this is it. And you're like, what, wait a minute, and I super appreciate that. So I can talk a lot about how you've helped me trust and helped me find the truth, which is my activation of what it is,
Exactly.
the wisdom that I'm sharing, and what it is that I'm here to do, and how it's been a huge journey for me. And you've been a massive part of that. I so appreciate it. I can't even begin to share how much I appreciate your ongoing, unconditional love and kindness, and bringing forth this for me in my life. And I want to know what's been different. What else is different for you? That's what I want to ask.
There's something really important, and I'm glad you brought this up about your activation, because knowing other people's activations has helped me also hugely, right?
Yeah.
These other people that I know personally,
Yes.
I know what's in their hands. I know their activation. It gives me so much more capacity to support them.
Yeah.
To see them, to know who they are, to understand why they're called to certain things. It gives me additional language, because I've also discovered that the activation codes are very related to what you have in your hands, of course.
Yes.
And a lot of related to your fingerprints, but not always. Sometimes you have some of their super really significant marking in your hand that the activation code relates to, but I can track it. So it's given me additional understanding and language, which is one of my favorite things about helping people, is having a whole spectrum of ways that I can communicate.
Yeah.
To make sure that they get it. So that's been really important for me. And knowing your activation, so when your activations of truth and abundance, when you are in a non-truth about yourself,
Yes.
I know that I can feel that because you're vibrating truth, right? Your activation is truth, and there's truth in the vibrational thing, even though you're temporarily in some other place. Or when I'm in some place that isn't my truth, I can feel by talking with you versus talking to somebody else who activates something completely different, that I'm going to get to the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's required. You see it. You see the truth. You're not going to tolerate not having the truth be in the field with somebody who has the agreement like we have. So I actually seek you out because of your activation. And when I'm not in the space for it, I don't seek you out.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm struggling with something or working through something and I'm not ready for the truth, I don't want to talk to John.
And the same thing is true for me. When I just want to be self-abusive and I just want to like be in my own, like, oh my gosh, I just want to make this so hard. Like, yeah, I'm not calling you on the phone because it will just disappear in an instant. And so I'm glad that you brought that up.
And it's good to know what other people activate, because then you know why you're having the response you are. So for a year and a half, I had a housemate when I was living in LA, and the sweet spot was part of my activation. And he told me at one point when we were talking about activations, Don was in that conversation, that there were times when he didn't want to be in that sweet spot. So he would just like hang out in his room or hang out in his office or not be home because he didn't want to be around that sweet spot energy. He wasn't in alignment with wanting that.
Right.
So that happens, right? It happens. To understanding this about your children or your spouses. I know what your husband activates, and we've talked about what your children activate. And so there are times when you're completely in alignment with that, and other times when you're repelled by it, and that's just part of the dynamic, but it's not personal.
Yeah.
That's the thing that really helps a lot, I think.
I love that. And there's something that you said that just reminded me of a point that I kind of want to bring up too, is that even though your roommate wasn't quite ready for the sweet spot, where he is now is definitely a result of that being in that space, in that energy of the sweet spot. So it sometimes it feels like it needs to be an immediate relationship, but the energy goes beyond us. Like sometimes we activate and turn something on, and whether or not we know what the result of that turning on is or not is really none of our business, which is, again, it's like, that's why it's not personal, because, like we're coded, we're designed, we're contracted to meet people and to do different things and to be places. So we can just share energy with somebody at a certain time in their lives when they need it. And we don't always know who or when or why or what. And we don't always get the privilege of seeing the results, but we are, because we're all in that conversation of what is our activation codes, how do we understand them when we're talking about it. So it's in our consciousness, but there are many people that we've helped that we'll never know about. And I think that that's really cool to know. And so when you were saying that, just reminded me, like our energy is a turning on. Even if somebody says, I'm not ready for it now, we've opened the doors for them. Like our energy has opened some door for them. At some time in the future, they might want to walk through that door, but it's open. They have permission to walk through it now. And that's one of your words that you always share with me is, we give permission to, for other people. All right. So I want to also ask you, do you know, or do you have a sense of what the impact is of your activation code? Maybe like in somebody else's life. Do you have a tangible example of that you'd like to share?
I have a few. Okay. One of the other activation codes I have is bonding.
Yes.
And that one I have lots of experience about what happened. So when I participate in a group, there is a bonding that happens in the group. People who don't want to participate in that bonding can't be in the group. And when I leave a group, the bond goes with me. Somehow the group changes. Sometimes they end and sometimes they change because my activation isn't there anymore. Don and I were part of a Facebook group for a long time that I finally realized I didn't want to be in that group anymore. I got out, and within a day or two, everybody else left.
It was over.
Group. It was a small group.
Right.
It was a small group, but my bonding activation had been removed, so there was not a connection with the group anymore. So I take responsibility for the fact that whatever group I join, there's going to be a bonding experience. So I have to be very conscious of joining a group or not joining a group. And then last week, I was teaching a class at a leadership institute. There was a lot of resistance in the group, coming into the group, because there's a big change in the program structure that's happened internationally. And I was stepping into a landmine that I didn't know I was stepping into. But I'm really aware of the amount of, there was a lot of abuse going on in the room, a lot of attack of the system. And of course, my activation would have just, the self-abuse and the abuse thing would have just hugely activated, like setting off an atomic bomb in a way, energetically, as well as people who weren't feeling bonded to the role that I was teaching about. There was a lot of negative feedback that came back about how I didn't teach it the way they needed me to teach it, because I wasn't teaching what would make them feel bonded to the work, and it wasn't their sweet spot.
Yeah.
I wasn't providing the sweet spot for them and there was a huge range of experience in the room. So there was a no-win situation for me as a teacher to be able to meet everybody's needs. So it was really challenging to be in that environment where I could see all of the condition path of the activation codes were active, as well as the liberated path, which is the master path, the thing that really works. All of that was present.
Yeah.
It was a lot to hold the space for all of that. And of course, the reviews, a lot of people filled out reviews, and the reviews came back about half of the people were really disappointed or upset because their needs didn't get met. They wanted me to do this, and they wanted me to do this and this and this and this. I couldn't do it all at an hour and 15 minutes, right? It was like an unreasonable request. So I'm just saying, I that was a very recent experience, and yet, whenever I am on vacation from my local Toastmasters group, which I just did in June. I was gone for a couple of weeks, and there were comments about how much people miss me when I'm not there because my bond energy isn't there.
Yeah,
my sweet spot energy is not there.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that, or for everybody else who's listening, that you came in and you have this energy, and you're in there to activate the bonding, and the bonding was, this is my understanding, my interpretation of this event. The bonding really was, you were there to hold the bond for the topic that you were asked to be, the leader
teaching.
About. Yes. Teaching. And everybody else was feeling the bonding activation, and they were responding to, I want to be bonded to what it is that I want the information about. so they were on their condition path, because now they want to bond with what they want to bond with, not necessarily what the topic of the class is. So that's a really great example of how people can react to the energy completely differently. And
the expectations and assumptions. They came in with expectations and assumptions.
Right. And those and the expectations and assumptions are what come in with our conditioning. I mean, it's really that's really our story. How do we live our lives? How are we coded, conditioned, not even coded, because coded is like the happiness, that the liberated path is like how we're coded, but how are we conditioned to respond to a bond energy? And for me, I'm a maverick. I'm a rule breaker. I'm a person who sometimes, when I feel like, if you were to say, I want to give you this gift of this bonding energy, I mean, my conditioned experience with that would be, oh no, that's going to feel like bondage, not a bond. Right? Like,
Right.
And so you've really helped me with your energy, because your energy is the higher frequency of what a bond really is. You've helped me understand that, that there could be such a liberation from being bonded to my work, and not like in bondage, right? But being in partnership with it, like having a real relationship with my work, which is more your language. And so that is, I just wanted to say that. So thanks again.
Yes.
I'm learning
Yes.
all the time. And, for me, I know that I activate abundance. And how do people conditionally experience? So when they feel abundant, some people go crazy. They think that the feeling of abundance means that they have to now have some kind of money experience. And a lot of times, in my past, in my childhood, people would look to me as being, I'm the one responsible now for making them money. And I'm not responsible for making anybody money. I'm a good attractor of money, but I am not responsible for anybody else's wealth. They're responsible for it. So I've had a lot of my own experiences with that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think to talk a little expansion on your activation around abundance is people having to, when they're in your presence, having to define what abundance actually is for them.
Oh, yeah.
Because you require truth.
Yes.
What is your true relationship with abundance? What is abundance truthfully for you? That's what comes up when people are in your activation field, which I'm in on a regular basis because we talk so often. So my experience is I've had to shift my consciousness in a good way, but I've had to, because if I want to be in a relationship with you, this is in every single time we have a connection. The truth of what abundance is has to come up. And maybe it's an abundance of friends, or abundance of trust, or an abundance of truth telling. Yeah. Right. And you and I have gotten very, very connected to truth telling in the last 4 years. Since we've been talking. I think I would say I am so much more open and vulnerable about my truth than I was before I was around your activation. And I feel abundant in telling my truth because I use my revelations and my truth in my newsletters, for example, when I'm communicating with my tribe, because I'm safe in my body now to know that I'm going to be safe to tell that truth. And it's an abundant experience for me. It's expanding.
Yes. And for me, the word abundance is expansion. Like that's what it feels like to me. And if we could all just celebrate and just that knowing that abundance is an expansion, an expansion of consciousness, an expansion of ideas, an expansion of friendships, or even a depth in our friendships is more of abundance, is more of an expansion, because it's a growingness. So I love that.
Right.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to share with anyone who might be listening about this work?
Yes, I do. And I really, with your activation, there's something I want to get very specific about.
Okay.
Because when you were talking about expansion, that's like related to your fingerprints, right? Your life lesson is dealing with, on the master path, the master path of your life lesson is about expanding your realm.
Oh, right.
Right?
Jupiter.
Left Jupiter is about expanding your realm on the master path. So in order for you to have a life that works, because your life lesson is your life's work, in order for you to have a life that works, you have to be in a mode of expansion. And when you get contracted, you're not in your truth.
Yes, which happens to me sometimes.
It does.
Feels it.
Right?
Yeah.
And when I'm in my contraction, I know that Dawn's going to be able to help me because her truth activation and she gets activated when I'm in not telling myself the truth or not trusting myself, which is her language. So hard to be around you when you're not trusting yourself. When I'm not trusting myself, you're the person who can help me the most, because you require me to tell the truth and you require me to expand my perception of whatever situation I'm in or whatever untruth I'm telling myself, wherever I'm being self-abusive in some way, right?
Yes.
So you activate that, and you're the person that I need to help me through that, because my other friends activate different things.
Yes.
So what if I need their activations, I will go do that. But you are required in your life to have your life work. Expansion is required for you, which is why the activation is so specific to everybody. Their specific
Right.
activation is totally related to what's in their hand. So because I speak hands language,
Right.
27 years in this field, I speak hands language. So that to me is like, yes, I get. So abundance has to be expansion for you, or it's not going to work, right? Somebody else may activate abundance and they have different fingerprints, and they're going to have a different conversation about what that is.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because some other people, because I've done this with a lot of people, so there are similar energies. Like I'll get the first word, like, oh, this person activates. The one that's coming up right now is integrity, because I have a couple of people that I know that activate integrity. But how that comes through my body and how I feel that and experience the word integrity from two different people is a different experience. So I help them understand, like, well, what's the flavor of integrity that they activate, as opposed to the flavor of integrity that this other person activates. It's still the same frequency, it's still the same words, but it has because it's the human body's holding the energy, that it's going to be translated a little bit different through every person, and every person's life experience is going to give them the wisdom and the tools to help them know what to do. And I guess this is coming out as the last thing I want to say, and maybe ask you about your experience about, is that when you activate healing self-abuse or healing abuse from others, like that's all in that healing abuse sphere. And when you're activating that, and everywhere you go, people from all your life, right? People have been responding to that energy in whatever way they respond to it. And so in your lifetime, you've had to create like a toolbox of things that you can help them work through that. And one of those very important tools for you has been hand analysis, right? Like that helps you help them work through that whole the whole healing of abuse, as well as your hands-on healing. I know you've done that before. You sing, and that also helps activate that healing. So you have collected
my art
and your art, right? I know you can't even forget your art. And everything that you touch and everything that you create is a form of, has that activation in it. And that's one of the things that we learned early on, is like our creations have our codes in them. So every time I write a book, it's got my code in it. Every time every time you send an email, you're sending out a little piece of your code, so people can feel more and more and more of that energy every time. And whether or not you could write the word, write something that's totally different, and that energy would still be there. But the more aligned you are, the more clear it is going to affect the people around you. So the more you're taking your own medicine of, I will take some of my own healing of abuse. Like I'm going to take that, right? I want that medicine. And the more we're saying, I want that for myself, the more we become a clear channel. I think I just went like all in different directions, but that's the thing, I guess, was the most important thing to get out, was the more we say yes to ourselves, which goes back to self-appreciation.
It
The
does.
more we appreciate who we are and what we activate, the more we get to expand, the more abundant we become in our own energy, and the more influence and impact we have that we may never know. So I don't know if
yes.
yeah.
Well, and yes, self-appreciation, which is your other work, is how to have your activations work.
Yes.
Appreciating your activations, the conditioned path and the liberated path, appreciating them, embracing them, significantly huge, which of course I've been doing that in the same time frame that all the activation stuff has come up. We started self-appreciation before the activation stuff.
Yeah.
Just appreciate posting self-appreciations daily in a group to be witnessed. We started before the activation conversation came up.
Right. And it's been such an amazing journey for me. And I appreciate you being a part of every piece of that journey and just being there to not only witness, but to help guide and help remind me, because I know both of us, we have I don't know if it's the purpose of our lives but one of the things that we do for other people is we help them remember who they are. And I think for me, that's the most important thing I can ever do for somebody, is to help them remember who they are at a soul level, remember their, divine spark, help them just remember that they are more than what they think they are. So, and I know you've done that for me.
And you've done it for me. Yes.
And I so appreciate it. And I just think, yeah, this has been such a fun ride. And it's not easy to say, I have something that I've never heard of before. Nobody else is teaching me this, but I'm getting this wisdom. And then having somebody like you there to help me interpret what do I do with it? Like,
right.
Always giving me like, well, what's the next step that you could do with this? So I have started groups. I have done the Facebook groups. I have had I started doing activation code readings, but all of that has been because you've been there to help me see what it is that I'm doing and see the wisdom is valuable. And
bonding with your work.
Yes, bonding with my work. And I can't thank you enough. I really can't thank you enough. And I just would like to end with that, with my deep gratitude for you, and grateful that you will be in my life for eternity. And I'm sure many, many lives.
We've already had many, but yes.
Yes.
You're welcome.
You're
my
welcome.
pleasure.
And for everyone else, I'm going to say thank you for joining us, and appreciate yourself. Never forget that you are more than what you think you are. And we will hopefully have more of these interviews. So thanks, Pamelah. I so appreciate
You're welcome. Love you.
Love you too.